As an investment, real estate has a lot of good features to offer, from cash flow to appreciation and even tax benefits. And because of this, many consider real estate to be the ultimate investment. And while I personally do believe that real estate is a very great investment vehicle, there's a couple of things you want to make sure you have in order before you dive right in. Hey everyone, it's Jonathan here, and in this video we're going to discuss 5 things that you must have before investing in real estate. And this is coming from the perspective of a real estate investor. So let's get right into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to sound pretty corny, but you need to have the right mindset. And I know a lot of people like to throw around that word a lot and be like, oh, you need to have a mindset. If you have a mindset, you'll become a millionaire, blah, 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 blah. Even though there is some truth to that, when I talk about mindset in this case, I'm just talking about kind of like the expectations to have as being a real estate investor. That, a lot of people think that real estate is just very easy passive income and you don't really have to do that much work other than just buy the property and then hire out a bunch of people to do the work. But honestly, it's a lot more complicated than that. And it's more of like you starting your own business. Even though it is quite passive most of the time, there are situations where it can become very active. One of those examples is if you go through eviction. I actually just went through one on one of my properties myself. Let me tell you, even if everything works out the best, it's still a headache. And even if you hire like property managers, contractors, etc., you still have to make sure that everything is being done the way that you want it to be done and it's being done correctly. And also, let's just say you have a vacant property. You have to make sure that that property is being kept well. So make sure that no one's squatting in there, no one's trying to steal anything from there, no one's trying to live there while you're in the middle of remodeling or trying to rent it out or anything like that. Some of the squatter laws can be crazy. Like I know here in California, I think if someone squats on a property for like 30 days, they technically are a tenant and they now have rights as a tenant. So you have to evict them off your property even though they're trespassing. Crazy, right? And I don't say this necessarily to discourage anyone from doing it, but I just want to be realistic up front. I know a lot of people on the internet get upset that the people who talk about a lot of these personal finance and real estate topics, they're not necessarily very upfront about the downsides of real estate, of investing in real estate. So I just want to make it clear that you are essentially running a business. And even though you are running a business, there's a very high likelihood that you probably won't cash flow much, if not at all. And obviously this is dependent on different markets. Generally speaking, usually the big play with real estate investing is more of appreciation and not necessarily cash flow. But again, like I said, every market is different and how everyone invests is different as well. For me personally, I tend to like to go the appreciation route and not the cash flow route, but every investor is different. So another thing you have to really have a good understanding of if you are going to get involved in real estate investing is that you have to understand the law very well. And really, you want to understand the tenancy law in the area that you are investing in. And I'm not saying that you have to become like an attorney or you have to have a very high knowledge of this stuff, but you should have some basic knowledge of some of the tenancy laws in your area. So for example, for me, I like to invest in the Sacramento area. So I understand how rent control works in this area. Basically, the way it works is that it's based off of the most recent April CPI non-core year over year number. So let's just say that's 4%. You can raise rents up to that percent plus an additional 5%, but there's a cap of 10%. And that cap was introduced when we had inflation at 9%. Nevertheless, you see how I have an understanding of the law in the market that I'm investing in. Now, even though you may have this knowledge, I would still suggest that you do seek appropriate legal counsel and not just depend on something you read on the internet, even if it is the law itself. Just because an attorney can have a much better working knowledge of the law. So, and in this case, if you hire someone to manage your rentals, they'll usually have a pretty good understanding of this as well. But I always say, if you're an investor or if you're a business owner, it's much better that you come at things from a perspective of knowledge. You know, like if you hire somebody to do something, you want to understand the quality of work they're doing. Well, you won't have that understanding if you don't even know how to do it yourself. It is good to, keep up on these laws and just pay attention to changes and have a good understanding of it as well and how it would apply to you. And honestly, sometimes in different markets, you'll be surprised some of the laws that exist. California has a reputation of having very tenant-friendly laws, but in some states, they have tenant-friendly laws that are much different than California. So if you are going to invest in some market that you don't really know about, it is really important that you have an understanding of those laws. This kind of plays on that ideal that if you shouldn't invest in something that you don't have a good understanding of. Another thing as well is that real estate is a very cash-intensive investment. And because of that, you need to have a consideration of reserves and savings. When it comes to reserves, really what you want to make sure is that every month you're taking out a certain amount of money for the maintenance of the property. I believe the general guideline is that you should save about 1% of the property's value every year. And just in case of maintenance issues on the property. That's not too bad of a guideline right there. And this is really important because a lot of times when things break, they break at the most inopportune time. So for example, I had one property where a water heater went out, which was about a $2,500 fix. Then I had a roof start to leak. So to repair the roof was like another $2,000. So in the span of a couple weeks, I had almost $5,000 of repairs that needed to be made. And luckily, because I have been saving up the money, it was just a matter of writing the check. But I know some investors where they don't even consider maintenance and they just see, oh, cash flow. I'm going to go and buy this. I'm going to go and buy that. I'm going to buy this thing that's frivolous, that thing that's frivolous. And then what happens is they end up in those situations and then they have to do something like take out a personal loan at like some ridiculous interest rate just to cover that. I will say out of pretty much all of the real estate investors that I know that own more than like 5 properties, they're like habitual savers. They are very stingy with their money. They are very conscious of where their money is going. And they're not just spending money willy-nilly. So I think that character trait is really important if you are going to get into real estate investing. So kind of playing along the lines with savings, something else you may also want to do is you might want to have money to remodel the property even after you buy it. And this would be obviously in addition to the down payment and closing costs for the purchase. So the remodel that you do, it doesn't necessarily have to be like the most pristine, up-to-date remodeling. But at the same time, you kind of want to avoid the bare bones, cheap, bare minimum kind of remodels. I guess this really just depends on like where the property that you bought is. But I noticed that generally speaking, if you go the bare bones, cheap way of remodeling, you usually get tenants that tend to become a problem over time. So it's kind of like that whole broken window theory where if you have a neighborhood that doesn't look good, then people tend not to take care of it. Whereas if you have a neighborhood that looks really nice, people tend to be more mindful of the way they treat the neighborhood. It's along those lines. So you do want to have something that looks nice, but isn't too expensive. And obviously this doesn't apply if you're going to move into a property yourself and live there. And quite frankly, honestly, in my opinion, the best thing to do is probably to buy a home that maybe needs a little bit of TLC, move into it and just try to live in it the way it is for like 5-10 years while you try to save up for like another property. And maybe even in the meantime, do some of the work yourself. And then when you buy that next property, you move out and then you fix up that old property and then you rent it out and then move on to the next one. That is an ideal, and I've seen people do that before. it's kind of like a cost-effective way of investing, mostly just because you could kind of kick some of this remodeling down the road and you don't have to come up with the money immediately. Something else I think is really important to know before you invest is anytime you invest in real estate, you have to have a good understanding of the neighborhood that you're buying real estate in. Always hear people say, oh, I want to buy real estate in this random city in the middle of nowhere because it has such great cash flow and the properties only cost $50,000 and this and that. And in my opinion, I think that's fine if you understand the area very well. For me, for example, I've lived in 3 different areas throughout my lifetime: the San Francisco Bay Area, the Sacramento area, and Southern Connecticut. So those are the only 3 markets I would ever consider investing in, because if you like blindfolded me and drove me around these the neighborhoods in this area, and then you just dropped me off on a random street corner, I could tell you if I would invest in that neighborhood or not. And I think that if you don't have that kind of understanding of a neighborhood or of an area, you really shouldn't be investing in it, because you don't understand kind of what drives people to live there. And if, let's say, for example, there's one employer that's driving everyone to live in like one city. Well, if that employer goes out of business or they move or something like that, then your investment just goes up in flames. So that's why, for me personally, like, I really suggest that you have a deep understanding of where you're investing. This video wasn't made necessarily to scare you away from real estate investing. I actually think it's a very great way to build your wealth in the long run. But it's just give you a couple of points of things that you really should consider before you get started investing in real estate. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.